Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I know that I've made similar videos on this topic recently that are still in the rotation, but I've had someone in the comments remind me of that who was in one of my videos about me doing Olympic squats, and he kind of pointed out why I don't understand all this, that range of motion doesn't always even mean muscles work harder, and again, he's following starting strength, so he's a little more novice lifter. And he kind of pointed out that, well, what about the closed grip bench press? It doesn't work the pecs more, maybe works on less, and it has a longer range of motion than a wider grip. So so clearly range of motion isn't always important for working a muscle. And my response is, yes, you're right, specifically in that instance, and that's why when we're discussing range of motion, right, we need to be looking at actual joint angles and be thinking in terms of that as range of motion, not how far our hands or the weight move. Okay, because that's a big difference. I've seen goofy influencers do reels with adjusting stuff on stuff like a rope press down, saying, aha, see, if you do it this way, you move it a longer distance, it's more range of motion. But they didn't actually do anything more with the joint. And in fact, they didn't even increase the range of motion at the most important point, the lengthened position where the muscle stretched. So we need to understand this difference, particularly in the context of when we're using it to stimulate muscle growth. Okay? What you need to understand is that the range of motion that most matters is the deep stretch position. So even those pull-ups there, the top does a lot less than the bottom does. So if you go into your stretch or a dead hang on it, that's where the most hypertrophy is. And I'm not saying, don't try to get further up if you're capable of it. I'm not saying do 4-inch range of motion reps just at the bottom on an exercise. I'm not promoting that. I want to be very clear there. But when we're discussing the exercise itself, we do need to think about that. So bench pressing. All right, what bench press gives the most range of motion on the pecs? The ones that gives the most range of motion on the pecs. It's not a wide or a closed grip by default. It's whichever one has your elbows go to the lowest angle while your forearms are 90 degrees at the bottom. So for me, look at the pinkies on the rings there. Notice that gives the deepest stretch on my pecs. If I go in closer, I lose a little bit of stretch on the pecs due to the angles. And if I go way wider, again, reduces the distance the elbows travel down and thus the stretch on the pectoral. And it's that bottom that we're looking at. When we're talking about ranges of motion for muscle growth, it really is, can we put muscles into a deeper lengthened position? Because again, that's where the magic happens, in those positions where the muscles are at the most mechanical disadvantage. All right, so same thing, notice my incline benching. We come all the way down, pause it, but notice the range of motion is long because of where my elbows are sitting and where I'm gripping it. Why? Because I'm trying to build my chest with those movements right now. Okay? So same thing even with these rows. Notice I row to my chest. Now technically it does add range of motion to the top to row to the chest instead of hitting the stomach. But I'm also stretching. I let my lats come apart and I stretch, go into scapular protraction at the bottom, right? Again, range of motion on the lats. We're putting stuff into stretched positions. It's not about how far the bar moves. It's about how far the joint angles go, particularly in the positions that cause the most growth, while keeping them loaded. The main thing is keeping that tension on the muscle in those positions. Now, if you have an exercise that goes in a length position and it unloads it, right? You see where we're going? It may not count for as much. Same thing, curls are one of the best ones to use. I'll do some curls and people will comment, well, you're not going all the way to the face, but I'm leaning forward and I'm completely locking the elbows at the bottom. All right, we're putting the biceps into a deeper stretch. Now, does that mean we have to stretch it at all ends of a joint? No, we're talking about on the primary function, in that case, the elbows. We're locking the elbows at the bottom. Now, is there a possibility that, hey, we might get more stretched in an incline? Maybe. Is it in a way that really impacts the muscle as greatly, you know? So same thing with these just plate laterals, right? So people, well, you could go all the way up in the air. You could, but it's not putting any more work on the side or the rear delts. It's all front delt at that point. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I do a ton of incline work and stuff already. You know, I might even add some standing presses eventually again. That would handle all of that. I'm not as worried. But what I am worried about is getting that bottom. That bottom part, that's again, the range of motions we're concerned with. The joint angles into those lengthened positions of the muscles. In that case, the delt's really complicated. The lengthened position is going to vary depending upon which head we're talking about. Okay. But curls, let's go back and talk about the curls. The strict curl is less bicep than a lot of other curls. The strict curl event, why? Because you don't lock the elbows in it. You start with a bent elbow. Pretty deep bent because you can have your legs out in front of you. You start with the weight on your thigh. You just can't use any body English. Okay? But it takes, you go all the way up to the face. People have their wrist cocked back. There's actually on that, the strict curl, do you know that half the movement doesn't work the bicep at all? The top half of that movement, the way it's done in competition, is again why people can lift so much weight, even with strictly. Well, they're taking the biceps out of their most mechanical disadvantaged position. The exercise is a longer range of motion, but the biceps are being worked through a shorter range of motion, and their lengthened position has been shortened. It's been removed. Well, that's a critical part of muscle growth, right? That bottom part matters. And then the top half, they're not using bicep at all. So while the exercise is a longer range of motion, the bar itself, the biceps functions are being worked through less joint angles. What? Yeah. And I'm not saying unloading at the top negates muscle. I don't think continual tension is actually that important. There's no evidence that it is. But look at it from that perspective, though. You are still doing less joint angles. So if you look at the primary function of the bicep to flex the elbow, right? You did less elbow flexing on that than on a lot of other types of curls. It's a shorter range of motion for the bicep, for the elbow joint. It's a longer range of motion of how far the bar moved. Understand the difference. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.